Hello, welcome back. It's me, Mr. Treewind. We're another installment of geometry. Today we're going to be looking at something called reflections. This is a two-part video, so part one is today we're just going to look at some basic reflections. Ones that kind of keep it a little bit more on the simple side, but they're still kind of complicated, but still. Anyways, so we went over reflections a little bit this last week in our classroom when we did our name graphs. I've got one kid here that I really liked. Hers was amazing looking, but these were all great examples of reflections. In this picture, we started with the very first quadrant, quadrant one, and we drew a picture of our name using this little coordinate system that we have. And then when we went over into this zone, we actually did a reflection. Same thing when we went down here, we reflected. This time we went over to the y-axis, this one we went over the x, and down here we went over both. If you can look at the images, you might be able to see, or the pictures here, you can see how each of these reflections took place. So I'm going to leave this here as we work, and I want to go over a couple things with you. And the first one is we're going to look at some of the symbols we use and how we interpret them. So my first example, I have written down A, B, and C, 3 coordinates, and then I wrote capital R, and then this is called subscript, where you make it real small, y-axis A, B, C. Well, what this is asking us to do is this translates into the word reflection. And reflection is one of 4 different transformations we're going to learn about in chapter 3. And the symbol for reflection is a capital R that is not in cursive. We'll get into the cursive R later, but right now capital R stands for reflection. And then what comes next is what we're going to reflect over, and then finally what comes at the end is the actual figure. In this case, we're supposed to reflect A, B, and C. So to jump right in with this, I'm going to start off with the very first step that you want to do, and that is to go ahead and draw, using your graph, draw in points A, B, and C. So A is at 1, 2, B is at 4, 0, and C is at 2, 5. So I'm going to connect these dots together, and I can see that it makes a triangle. Okay, so this is called our pre-image because we're about to do a reflection, which is part of a group of things called a bigger group called transformation. And when we do the reflection, the new triangle I draw has a new name. It's called the image. This is called the pre-image, and what I'm about to draw is called the image. Now, when I go to draw this, right now I'm just going to show you a simple way of counting. I'm not really going to go into a formula at this time. I'm just going to go with a counting. But it kind of goes back to when we did our name graphs, and I think if you did your name graph in class, then you probably understand what's about to happen. But when I reflect over the y-axis, I'm going to take triangle ABC and I'm going to draw a mirror image over this line. So this is the line that I'm reflecting over. And so what's happening is, each time I reflect over it, what I'm really doing is, in essence, I'm counting the distance away from that line. So the distance to A is 1 over to the right, so the reflection is going to be 1 to the left. Because remember, we're reflecting over the y-axis. B, for example, is 4 units to the right, so its reflection is 4 units to the left. And then C, again, we're always counting the item that we reflect over is what we're counting our distance from. So because this line is a vertical line going up and down the page, we count horizontally, which means this case is 2 units to the right, so 2 units to the left. And now we have what's called our image. This was our pre-image, and this is our image. And there's a special way that you denote which one's the before and which one's the after, which one's the pre-image or image. And it's these little symbols that are called primes, or A prime, B prime, or C prime. I think we can just agree they all look kind of like, just putting a little apostrophes right there. Okay, and now we're having an afternoon announcement, but I'm going to wait this out. All right.
Can give you one. Again, if you're teaching simultaneously,
so let's look at,
I have a deal for you. There's a monitor waiting for you in the media center. Please see Miss Hearn before you go home today. Thank you. Have a good weekend.
I'm not redoing the video to wait for announcements. So anyways, Going back to what actually happened, if we think about it in reality, if you notice in this picture, like A was at 1, 2, but its reflection is at negative 1, 2. So I kept one value the same and I changed which value? The x's. If I reflect over y, I change the x. If I reflect over the x, I'm going to change the y. So let's look at these. So this one was negative 1, 2. Now this one will become negative 4, 0, negative 2, 5. And those are going to be called the image. And we put a little apostrophes next to them, or primes if you want to be technical. And anyways, that's how you do a reflection. So in this case, we reflected this yellow figure over the y-axis, and now it's that red figure. So we went like this. Now the next example, we got 3 points, and this time it wants me to reflect over the x-axis. All right, so first things first, let's draw the points. So negative 2, 5 is my A value. And then 0, 3 is my B. And C is negative 4, oh, negative 1. All right, so now I'm going to reflect over the x-axis. So like we talked about in the last example, when I reflect over the y-axis, I change the x values. But when I reflect over the x-axis, I change the y values. So when I go to draw my image, it should look like this. I should be keeping the x values and changing that positive 5 should become negative 5. So I'm going to do this first, kind of do it in reverse from the last problem and see if we get what we think we're going to get. So let's say I change this one, keeping that x value the same and changing the y. Oh, wait a minute, this one's already negative, so if I change it, I guess it needs to be positive, right? Because I said switch the values. So let's see what happens when I go to draw this out. Negative 2, negative 5. And that's A. 0, negative 3. That's B. And C would be negative 4, but positive 1. And let's see what happens. You see how when I did that, it drew a reflection that went over the x-axis. And since this C value was kind of below the x-axis, when it's reflected, it's now going to be above. And you can see that each of these forms a reflection. Now we have one last example, and this is a little bit of more of a challenging question that we're going to look at. These were our basics, if you will, and this one's a little bit more challenging. And this is when we reflect over a line. And I say that's challenging because of the fact that you can't just simply go through and change all the values real fast. You actually have to really think this out. And it has to do with a little bit with midpoint, which we're going to talk about later. You notice this is a 2-part video, so part 1 is just going to be the basics. And we're going to go a little bit in depth, more in depth on part 2. All right, so let's look at this last example. And this time, let's read it out and see what it says. I got an A, B, and a C. And this time it wants me to reflect, and instead of writing an axis, it said y equals 2. Now we talked about these in chapter 2, and when I say y equals 2, that is drawing over a specific line. And I'm going to get back on that in a moment. But first things first, let me draw it out. I've got 1, 1, that's going to be my A value. Negative 2, negative 1, that's my B value. And C is at 0, 5, so that's up here. All right, so connecting the dots. Oh wow, I missed on that one, but we'll do better. All right. All right. Now it says I need to reflect over the line y equals 2. Well, in algebra, we talked about this in a previous video. Is that when I say draw the line y equals 2, remember that interprets in algebra as cross the y-axis at the number 2. So I need to draw a straight line that crosses the y-axis at the number 2. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, but I'm not going to draw it in permanently. What I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a little bit of a dotted line. And what I'm saying is cross the y-axis, that's this one, at the number 2, and it gives you a line that looks like this. This is the line y equals 2. So let's think about this. What am I asking you to do again? Reflect. And how did we do each of these? We counted in the opposite direction. So I can see that this is a horizontal line, which means when it comes to counting, I'm counting vertically up and down because I'm always doing the opposite. So this is a horizontal line. So when it comes time to count, it's time to start counting vertically. So when I look at, for example, point A, it is exactly 1 unit below the line. So its reflection should be 1 unit above. Just like on this one, we're 1, 2, 3 below. Well, let's count 1, 2, 3 above, and we're gonna get our next value. And the last one is 1, 2, 3. So 1, 2, 3. And now when I connect these 3 dots, let's see what I get. And you can see that I've reflected over the line y equals 2. Let's write down those values and see if we can see anything with them. Let's see, A is now at 1, 3. B is at -2, +5. And C is at 0, -1.
Will Jaden Vieira
And
please
if you
come
look
to
at
the
this,
front office?
We're going to talk a
Jaden
little bit more
Vieira,
about the
please come
difference
to the
between
front
them and how
office.
far we do this, but right now I'm going to stick with, just going to let it ride right here, and then in part 2 we're going to pick up with this problem again. So I think that's enough for one day, and we're going to get started on an assignment on our canvas. So have a great day, and that's the end of this. Thank you.